Find a comfortable position now and let your body settle wherever you are resting. Feel the weight of yourself against the mattress and the pillow. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench, and take one slow breath in through your nose. And let it out gently through your mouth. Tonight, I want to ask you something. What would it take for something to simply vanish? Not sink slowly, not crash and leave wreckage behind, not burn and send up smoke that someone somewhere would see, but vanish completely. No wreckage, no bodies, no distress signal, no explanation. Just gone. In the western North Atlantic Ocean, there is a stretch of water that has done exactly this again and again to ships and aircraft and hundreds of human beings who set out on ordinary journeys and simply never arrived. It is roughly bounded by 3 points: Miami, Florida to the west, the island of Bermuda to the north, and Puerto Rico to the south. Together, they form a triangle. Most people know its name, the Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle. 700,000 square kilometers of ocean, one of the most heavily traveled stretches of water on Earth, crossed by thousands of ships and aircraft every single year. And yet something keeps happening here that science has never fully explained. Tonight we are going to go there together, into that triangle of dark water, into the disappearances and the theories and the things that remain stubbornly, persistently, maddeningly unexplained. I want to be honest with you before we begin. Some of what I'm going to tell you tonight has explanations, and some of it does not. And that is exactly what makes it worth staying awake for. So close your eyes if they are not already. Let your breathing slow, and let us begin at the very beginning. The story of the Bermuda Triangle does not begin in 1945 with a vanished squadron of bombers. It begins in 1492 with a man standing on the deck of a ship called the Santa Maria, watching something he could not explain. Christopher Columbus was crossing the Atlantic Ocean on his first voyage to the Americas when his ships entered what we now call the Bermuda Triangle. And he recorded several things in his log that have never been satisfactorily explained. The first was his compass. Columbus wrote that his compass needle was behaving strangely, not pointing to magnetic north as it should, but shifting and moving as if something beneath the water was pulling at it. He did not tell his crew, because a crew who believed their compass was broken in the middle of the Atlantic was a crew who might mutiny. So Columbus kept the readings to himself and sailed on. The second thing he recorded was a light. Not the light of another ship, not the light of a star, but a strange glowing, flickering light rising from somewhere below the surface of the ocean, moving, pulsing, and then gone. What was it? Nobody knows. Columbus simply wrote it down and sailed on, because what else do you do when you are in the middle of an ocean no European has ever crossed and something glows beneath you in the dark? The third thing was the Sargasso Sea, a body of water within the Bermuda Triangle unlike any other place on Earth. It has no coastline, no land surrounding it on any side, and it is filled with a thick mat of seaweed called sargassum, stretching for thousands of kilometers in every direction. Sailors feared it for centuries, telling stories of ships becoming trapped in the weed for weeks with no wind to move them. Columbus sailed through it, his crew panicking, believing they were sailing to the edge of the world. He got through. But the compass anomaly he recorded in 1492 was not the last time someone would experience something unexplainable in this stretch of ocean. Not even close. March 1918. World War I is still being fought. The oceans are full of ships, and one of the largest vessels the United States Navy has ever built is making a routine voyage from Barbados to Baltimore. The USS Cyclops, 542 feet long, over 300 men aboard, carrying 10,000 tons of manganese ore. The Cyclops left Barbados on March 4, 1918. It never arrived in Baltimore. No distress signal was ever received. This is one of the most extraordinary details of the Cyclops' disappearance, and it is one that has never been explained. The ship was equipped with wireless communication equipment. If anything had gone wrong, if a storm had hit, if the ship had begun to take on water, if there had been any warning at all, the crew would have had time to send a signal. But there was nothing. Complete silence, as if the ship and its 300 men had been removed from the surface of the ocean between one moment and the next. The United States government launched one of the largest search operations in its history. Ships covered the entire route. The coastline was searched. The ocean floor was scanned. No wreckage was ever found, not a plank, not a life preserver, not a single piece of the largest ship in the U.S. Navy fleet. President Woodrow Wilson said, "Only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship. Only God and the sea." And here is where it gets stranger. The USS Cyclops had two sister ships, the USS Proteus and the USS Nereus, both built to the same design and carrying similar heavy cargo. In 1941, more than 20 years after the Cyclops vanished, both sister ships disappeared along nearly the same route, both without a distress call, both without wreckage. 3 ships, the same design, the same route, the same silence. Some researchers say the heavy cargo caused structural failure, that the ships broke apart under the weight of the ore they were carrying. But a ship breaking apart under stress does not do so in an instant. There would be time to send a signal, time to launch a lifeboat, time for there to be survivors. There were none. December 5th, 1945. The war is over. At a naval air station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 5 torpedo bombers are preparing for a routine training flight. 14 men, experienced pilots, a clear afternoon, a mission they had all done before. They were designated Flight 19. The mission was simple: fly east over the ocean for 160 miles, complete a practice bombing run, turn north, then return west to Fort Lauderdale. A triangle-shaped route over open water, estimated time of return 2 hours. Flight 19 took off at 2:10 in the afternoon. By 3:40, something had gone wrong. The flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, radioed the control tower with a message that has been discussed and debated ever since. He said, "We cannot be sure of any direction. Even the ocean does not look as it should. Even the ocean does not look as it should." Think about what that means. An experienced Navy pilot, flying over water he had flown over before, saying something about the ocean below him looked wrong, different, in a way he could not explain. The radio transmissions from Flight 19 over the next 2 hours paint a picture of 5 aircraft flying in circles, pilots disagreeing about direction, compasses behaving erratically, fuel running low, and then one by one, the voices going quiet. The last message received was at 7:04 in the evening. After that, silence. The Navy launched a rescue operation immediately. A large flying boat called a PBM Mariner, carrying 13 crew, took off at 7:27 to search for Flight 19. 23 minutes after takeoff, it also disappeared. A ship reported seeing a burst of flame in the sky at around that time, but no wreckage from the rescue plane was ever found, and no wreckage from Flight 19 was ever found. 27 people in 6 aircraft in a single afternoon and evening. The official Navy investigation concluded that the disappearance was due to causes or reasons unknown. That phrase was used in an official U.S. Navy document in 1945, and it has never been revised. Now I want to tell you what scientists have proposed to explain the Bermuda Triangle, because there are serious theories put forward by serious people with serious credentials. And I want to be honest about what each theory explains and what it fails to explain. The first theory is methane hydrates. Beneath the floor of the ocean in the Bermuda Triangle, there are massive deposits of a compound called methane hydrate. Methane gas locked into a solid crystal form by the cold and pressure of the deep ocean. Under certain conditions, a change in temperature or pressure, these deposits can destabilize and enormous quantities of methane gas can erupt from the ocean floor and rise to the surface. What does this do to a ship? It reduces the density of the surrounding water almost instantly, and a ship floating on less dense water loses its buoyancy and sinks rapidly without warning, without time to send a distress signal, without leaving wreckage at the surface. This theory would explain the sudden and silent disappearances, the lack of wreckage, the lack of distress calls. But it does not explain the aircraft. And Flight 19's pilots did not report engine failure. They reported confusion about navigation and compass readings. They kept flying for hours. Methane cloud does not explain what Lieutenant Taylor described when he said the ocean did not look as it should. The second theory is hexagonal clouds. Meteorologists studying satellite images of the Bermuda Triangle discovered that clouds forming over the region sometimes have perfectly straight edges, hexagonal shapes between 20 and 55 miles wide. This is almost unheard of in meteorology. Clouds do not naturally form straight edges. And what these hexagonal clouds produce are microbursts of wind reaching 170 miles per hour, downward blasts that hit the ocean surface and create waves up to 45 feet tall with almost no warning. A ship caught under one would be overwhelmed in seconds with no time for a signal, no time for a lifeboat. But it was clear weather on December 5, 1945, when Flight 19 took off. No hexagonal clouds, no microbursts, a clear blue afternoon sky. So this theory also does not fully explain what happened. There is one detail that appears again and again across the disappearances of the Bermuda Triangle: the compass. Columbus noticed it in 1492. Flight 19's pilots reported it in 1945. Dozens of pilots and sailors across the centuries in between reported the same thing: compasses behaving strangely, not broken, not stuck, but moving in ways they should not. There is a scientific explanation for part of this. The Bermuda Triangle is one of only 2 places on Earth where a magnetic compass points to true north rather than magnetic north. Normally, a compass needle is pulled slightly toward magnetic north, which is not exactly the same as geographic north, and pilots and navigators account for this difference, called magnetic declination, in all their calculations. But in the Bermuda Triangle, this difference nearly disappears, and the compass points almost exactly to geographic north. For a navigator who has been compensating for magnetic declination their entire career, suddenly finding their compass pointing differently is deeply disorienting. It could cause them to believe they are traveling in one direction when they are traveling in another. And in the middle of a featureless ocean with no landmarks visible in any direction, this kind of error is fatal. But here is what keeps me awake about this explanation. Columbus noticed the compass anomaly in 1492. 500 years of sailors had crossed this ocean since then. The anomaly was known, documented, recorded. So why were pilots still getting lost because of it in 1945? And why did multiple ships with radio navigation and multiple crew members cross-checking position also disappear with no explanation? The compass anomaly explains some things. It does not explain everything. I want to tell you something about the ocean in the Bermuda Triangle that most people do not know. Something that has nothing to do with mystery or legend, just pure geography, pure science, that makes this stretch of water genuinely and measurably different from almost anywhere else on Earth. The Gulf Stream. Running through the Bermuda Triangle is one of the most powerful ocean currents on the planet. The Gulf Stream moves north along the eastern coast of North America at speeds of up to 2.5 meters per second. And it carries more water than all the rivers on Earth combined. All of them. The Amazon, the Nile, the Mississippi, the Yangtze, all of them together do not move as much water as the Gulf Stream moves through the Bermuda Triangle every single second. What this means for a ship is that if it goes down in the Bermuda Triangle, the wreckage does not stay where the ship sank. The Gulf Stream carries it away rapidly, dispersing debris across hundreds of miles of ocean within hours. This is a genuine scientific explanation for why wreckage from Bermuda Triangle disappearances is rarely found, not because the ships were swallowed by some supernatural force, but because the most powerful current on Earth runs directly through the search area and takes everything away before anyone can find it. And the ocean floor here is one of the deepest and most complex on Earth. The Puerto Rico Trench at the southern edge of the triangle is the deepest point in the entire Atlantic Ocean, 8,376 meters down. Wreckage that sinks to that depth enters a place where the pressure is so extreme that human technology has only rarely managed to reach it. So perhaps the mystery of the missing wreckage is not supernatural at all. Perhaps it is simply the ocean doing what oceans do, taking things down into the dark where it cannot follow. But that still does not tell us why the ships and aircraft went down in the first place. The Gulf Stream explains where the wreckage went. It does not explain the silence. The missing distress calls, the compasses that pointed wrong, the ocean that did not look as it should. I want to tell you about some cases that even the most skeptical scientists struggle to explain. Not the ones where human error is the most likely answer. The ones where something else seems to be going on. In December 1967, a cabin cruiser called the Witchcraft left Miami Harbor with its owner Dan Burak and a friend, Father Patrick Horgan, for a short trip to see the Christmas lights along the Miami shoreline. They were less than a mile offshore. 20 minutes after leaving harbor, Dan Burek called the Coast Guard to report that his boat had struck something and was taking on water. He was not in danger. He simply needed a tow. The Coast Guard dispatched a boat immediately and reached the coordinates in 19 minutes. The Witchcraft was gone. Not sinking, not capsized, not showing any lights. Just gone. The Coast Guard searched for 3 days across 1,200 square miles of ocean and found nothing. Not the boat, not a life jacket, not a piece of wood, not the flare gun required by law to be on board. The Witchcraft had been custom built with a hull designed to be virtually unsinkable. Its buoyancy chambers were designed to keep it floating even if completely flooded. It should have been impossible for it to sink quickly enough to leave no trace in calm water less than a mile from shore in 19 minutes. And yet, Dan Burek and Father Patrick Horgan were never found. Now I want to tell you about something reported from the floor of the Bermuda Triangle. Something that, even if not true in the form it has been reported, points to something real and genuinely mysterious beneath the water. In the 1970s, several researchers claimed to have discovered a large pyramid-shaped structure on the ocean floor within the Bermuda Triangle. Some described it as made of a crystal-like material. Some connected it to Atlantis. The scientific community dismissed these claims, and no verified sonar scan has ever confirmed the existence of such a structure. But here is what is true. There are structures on the ocean floor of the Bermuda Triangle that we do not fully understand. The ocean floor in this region is geologically complex, still being mapped and studied. And the methane hydrate deposits on the ocean floor do produce unusual acoustic signatures when scanned by sonar, signatures that have sometimes been misinterpreted as artificial structures. So is there a crystal pyramid on the ocean floor of the Bermuda Triangle? Almost certainly not in the way the legend describes. But are there structures on that ocean floor that we've not yet fully explained? Yes. And in a region where unexplained things have a habit of turning out to be more interesting than anyone expected, that feels worth holding on to. Just floating in the dark. The way a question floats. Without needing an answer tonight. I promised you at the beginning that I would tell you what science has finally found about the Bermuda Triangle. In 1975, a researcher named Lawrence David Kusha published a book called The Bermuda Triangle Mystery, Solved. In it, he made a methodical argument that became the foundation of scientific skepticism about the triangle for the next 50 years. Kusha went back to the original sources. Not the books written about the Bermuda Triangle, not the magazine articles or television specials, but the original Coast Guard records, the insurance reports, the newspaper accounts from the actual time of each disappearance. And what he found was astonishing. Many famous Bermuda Triangle disappearances did not happen within the triangle at all. The locations had been quietly moved in retellings until they ended up inside the triangle's boundaries, when they had actually occurred hundreds of miles away. Several disappearances described as happening in calm conditions had actually occurred during storms, The storms simply left out of popular accounts because storms are not mysterious and supernatural forces are. Some ships described as having vanished without trace had actually been found, but the finding was not added to the Bermuda Triangle story because it spoiled the mystery. Lloyd's of London, the oldest maritime insurance company in the world, does not charge higher premiums for ships traveling through the Bermuda Triangle. The United States Coast Guard does not consider it an unusually dangerous region. So, is the Bermuda Triangle mystery solved? Kusha says yes. Most scientists agree with him. And yet, the USS Cyclops disappeared without a distress signal and without a single piece of wreckage ever being found. Flight 19's pilot said the ocean did not look as it should. The Witchcraft vanished in calm water less than a mile from shore in 19 minutes, while the Coast Guard was already on their way. Kusha can explain many of the Triangle's mysteries. He cannot explain all of them. And the ones he cannot explain are precisely the ones that have always been the most compelling. Here is what I believe about the Bermuda Triangle. Not as a scientist or a researcher, but as someone who has spent a long time sitting with this story in the quiet. I believe that most of what happened here has ordinary explanations. Human error, violent weather, the Gulf Stream carrying away the evidence, the deep trench taking everything down into the dark. I believe the legend grew because human beings are pattern-seeking creatures who look for meaning and coincidence, who want the ocean to have a secret because an ocean with a secret is more interesting than an ocean that simply kills through bad weather and poor navigation. I believe all of that. And I also believe that the USS Cyclops has never been found. That Flight 19's pilot said something that afternoon that we still cannot fully account for. That a virtually unsinkable boat disappeared in calm water a mile from shore in 19 minutes, and no one has ever explained how. I believe both things simultaneously. That most of the mystery is explainable, and that some of it is not. I think that is the most honest and most quietly unsettling conclusion of all. Because it would be easier if the whole thing were a myth. But the ocean is not just an ocean. It is 95% unexplored. It moves more water than every river on Earth combined. And somewhere between Miami and Bermuda and Puerto Rico, there are ships and aircraft and hundreds of human beings who set out on ordinary journeys and did not come back. The ocean knows where they are. We do not. And we can rest in that uncertainty tonight. Not knowing is not failure. Not knowing is simply honesty. There is something deeply peaceful about an honest question that does not demand an answer. Let your thoughts go now. All of them. Triangle and the ships and the silence and the ocean. Let them drift away from you slowly. To the dark. Not everyone who flew through the Bermuda Triangle disappeared. Most people did not. Thousands of flights cross the triangle every year without incident. Commercial airliners carrying hundreds of passengers, cargo planes, private aircraft, military jets. But some of the pilots who came back reported things. Not disasters. Not emergencies. But experiences that stayed with them. That they talked about quietly, sometimes years later, often reluctantly, because pilots are not a profession that encourages stories about things that cannot be explained. One of the most reported experiences is what pilots call the electronic fog. A pilot named Bruce Jernan described it in detail in a book he wrote about his experience in 1970. He was flying from the Bahamas to Miami, a routine flight, when he encountered a cloud formation ahead of him he described as unlike any he had ever seen. It was forming rapidly, almost as if it were growing, taking shape while he watched it. Jernan flew into the cloud. Inside it, he encountered what he described as a tunnel, a clear corridor through the cloud with walls of white on either side and a circle of blue sky visible at the far end. He flew toward the blue sky at the end of the tunnel. And when he emerged from the cloud, he looked at his instruments. All of them were malfunctioning simultaneously. His compass was spinning. His navigation equipment showed no position. His radio was producing static. He looked down at the ocean below him. He could not identify where he was. The ocean, he said, looked hazy, greenish, as if seen through a mist that was not quite weather and not quite anything else he could name. And then Miami appeared below him. He had covered what should have been a 75-minute flight in 47 minutes. 28 minutes had disappeared. His fuel consumption confirmed it. His engines had burned only enough fuel for 47 minutes of flight. He had not accelerated. He had not caught a tailwind that could account for that kind of time saving. 28 minutes simply were not there. Jernan is a credible witness, a licensed pilot with decades of experience. And he's not the only one who's reported something like this. Other pilots over the decades have reported compass anomalies that resolved themselves as soon as they left the triangle's airspace. Unexplained losses of radio contact that resumed the moment they crossed a certain invisible line in the air above the ocean. A feeling of disorientation that was not vertigo and not instrument failure, but something they could not name. A sense that the air itself was behaving differently than it should. None of these accounts prove anything. A skeptic would say Jernan miscalculated his fuel load, that the cloud was simply an unusual cloud, that the instruments malfunctioned for ordinary reasons. And the skeptic might be right. But Lieutenant Taylor said the ocean did not look as it should. And Bruce Jernan said the ocean looked hazy and greenish and unlike anything he could name. Two pilots, 25 years apart, describing the same ocean, looking wrong in the same way. And one of them came back. One of them did not. Your breathing is very slow now. Your body very still. The questions resting in the dark around you like fog over water. I want to tell you something that has nothing to do with ships or aircraft or compasses pointing the wrong way. I want to tell you what I think we are really asking when we ask about the Bermuda Triangle. Because I do not think we are really asking about missing ships. Not really. I think we are asking something much older and much more personal than that. We are asking whether the world is fully known. Whether everything has an explanation. Whether the maps we have drawn of reality, with their neat categories and their cause and effect and their insistence that every question has an answer if you look hard enough, whether those maps are complete. Or whether there are still places where the map runs out, where the territory goes beyond what the cartographers have charted, where something can happen that does not fit the known categories. The Bermuda Triangle asks us this. Not because it is necessarily supernatural. Not because it is necessarily mysterious in any profound sense. but because the cases at its heart, the Cyclops, Flight 19, the witchcraft, are cases where the ordinary explanations run thin. Where you keep asking why, and the answers keep having holes in them. Where the most honest thing a United States Navy document could say in 1945 was, causes or reasons unknown. And I think we find that phrase both terrifying and comforting in equal measure. Terrifying because we want the world to be knowable. We want our instruments to point true. We want the ocean to look the way it should. We want to send a ship out and have it come back. And comforting because if causes are sometimes unknown, the world still has corners that do not answer to our explanations, then the world is larger than we thought. And a world that is larger than we thought is a world that still has room in it. Room for the things we have not found yet. Room for the answers that have not arrived yet. Room for the ships that are still somewhere we cannot see. Room for questions that do not need to be answered tonight. There is a kind of peace in that. Not the peace of having everything settled, but the peace of being able to rest inside an open question. To lie in the dark and not know something and be all right with not knowing it. To let the triangle be the triangle. To let the ocean keep its secrets for one more night. To let your mind stop reaching for the answer and simply float. The way the Sargasso Sea floats between the currents, held by nothing on any side. Perfectly still. And perfectly dark. And perfectly at rest. You're the Sargasso Sea right now. Held by nothing. Bounded by nothing. Just floating in the middle of an ocean that is larger than you will ever fully understand. And that is not frightening. That is the oldest feeling in the world. Human beings have always been small things floating in large oceans. We've always known more questions than answers. We've always gone to sleep not knowing something important. And we've always woken up anyway. You will wake up tomorrow. The questions will still be there. The triangle will still be there. The ocean will still be keeping whatever it is keeping. And you will have another day to wonder about it. Not tonight. Tonight you are done wondering. Tonight you're just floating. Warm. Dark. Still. Going nowhere. You need to go nowhere. Already exactly where you're supposed to be. Let the last thought go now. Whatever it was. Let it drift. Into the current. Away from you. There is a story from the Bermuda Triangle that is so strange, so specific in its detail, and so difficult to explain that even researchers who dismiss most Bermuda Triangle accounts find themselves pausing at this one. It involves a British ship called the Ellen Austin. The year is 1881. The Ellen Austin is crossing the North Atlantic, passing through the western reaches of what we now call the Bermuda Triangle, when the crew spots something in the horizon. Another ship. Moving erratically. No flag flying. No smoke from any engine. No sign of anyone on deck. The captain of the Ellen Austin ordered a course change to investigate. As they drew closer, the reason for the erratic movement became clear. The ship was sailing itself. No one was at the helm. The sails were set but untended. The rigging moved in the wind. And as the crew of the Ellen Austin came alongside and finally boarded the vessel, they found something that would stay with every man among them for the rest of their lives. The ship was completely abandoned. Not in distress. Not damaged. Not showing any sign of whatever had driven its crew away. The cargo was intact in the hold. The food was still in the galley. Personal belongings were in the cabins as if their owners had simply stepped outside for a moment and forgotten to return. There was no sign of violence. No sign of fire. No sign of struggle. No indication that anything aboard had gone wrong in any way that anyone could identify. The crew of the Ellen Austin searched the ship thoroughly. They found no one. Not below decks, not in the rigging, not hidden anywhere. Whoever had crewed this ship had simply left it. The captain of the Ellen Austin made a decision that seemed entirely reasonable at the time. He would put a small prize crew aboard the abandoned vessel, a group of his own men, and they would sail both ships together to the nearest port where the mystery could be investigated and the ship claimed as salvage. The two ships set off together. And then the weather changed. A squall came in, fast and fierce the way Atlantic weather can be, and in the reduced visibility of the storm, the two ships became separated. The Ellen Austin lost sight of the abandoned vessel in the rain and wind. When the storm cleared, the captain searched for the other ship. He found it. Sailing alone again. The prize crew he had placed aboard, his own men he knew by name, were gone. Not a trace of them. The ship was abandoned again, exactly as it had been when the Ellen Austin first found it. The captain put a second prize crew aboard. According to the account, several of the men refused to go. They had seen enough. But some agreed, and they boarded the abandoned vessel for the second time, and the two ships sailed on together. The accounts of what happened next vary. Some say the two ships became separated again in another squall, and the abandoned vessel was never seen again. Some say it was brought successfully to port. Some say the second prize crew also vanished. What is consistent across all versions of the account is the first part. A ship found sailing itself with no crew. A prize crew placed aboard. A storm. And the ship found sailing itself again with no crew. What happened to the original crew of the abandoned ship is not known. What happened to the Ellen Austin's prize crew is not known. Two crews. Same ship. Both gone. Let your body settle a little deeper now. Questions floating around you in the dark like ships with no one at the helm. In the 1990s, the United States government was doing something very quietly in the Atlantic Ocean. They were listening. A network of underwater microphones, hydrophones, had been placed at various depths across the Atlantic Ocean floor during the Cold War. They were designed to detect the sound signatures of Soviet submarines, to track movement beneath the surface, to give the United States Navy advance warning of anything moving in the deep water. When the Cold War ended, these hydrophones were declassified and handed to scientists. Oceanographers and marine biologists began using them to listen to the natural sounds of the deep ocean. Whale song, geological movement, the sound of underwater earthquakes on the other side of the planet. And they heard something else. Something that did not fit any known category. In 1997, researchers at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recorded an ultra-low frequency sound rising from somewhere deep in the Pacific Ocean. It was extraordinarily loud, loud enough to be detected by hydrophones more than 5,000 kilometers apart simultaneously. Which means whatever produced it was producing more sound energy than any known biological creature on Earth is capable of generating. They called it the bloop. The sound rose in frequency over about 1 minute and then stopped. It was recorded several times that year and then never heard again. For years, the bloop was one of the most discussed unexplained sounds in all of ocean research. Some scientists proposed it was a massive unidentified creature, something in the deep ocean so large that no known species could account for it. Something the ocean had been hiding in the darkness below the depth at which light can reach. In 2012, NOAA published their conclusion. The bloop, they said, was most likely the sound of a large ice quake, a massive fracture in the Antarctic ice shelf producing a sound signature that traveled through the ocean at extreme distances. Most researchers accepted this explanation. But the hydrophones in the Atlantic, the ones positioned near the Bermuda Triangle, have also recorded sounds that remain less easily explained. Low-frequency pulses that do not match known geological activity. Rhythmic sounds that repeat at intervals that seem almost too regular to be natural. Sounds that rise from depths where the ocean floor in the Bermuda Triangle does things that the ocean floor elsewhere does not do, where the Puerto Rico Trench drops into darkness more than 8 kilometers below the surface, and where the geological complexity of the region produces effects that are still being studied. Are these sounds the methane hydrates destabilizing beneath the ocean floor? Are they geological, the slow movement of tectonic plates in one of the most geologically active ocean regions on Earth? Are they something the ocean is doing that we do not yet have a name for? The researchers who study them are careful in what they claim. They note the sounds. They record them. They compare them against known signatures. And sometimes they simply write in their reports, source unknown. Source unknown. In a region already full of things whose source is unknown. Let that sit with you in the quiet. The ocean speaking in a language we've not yet learned to read. Before the Bermuda Triangle had a name, the ocean in this region was already telling stories. Not legends. Not mythology. Documented accounts, recorded in ship's logs and harbor master records and insurance company files, going back centuries before anyone thought to draw a triangle on a map and call it something. I want to tell you about some of these older accounts tonight, as your breathing slows and your body grows heavier, because they suggest something that the modern Bermuda Triangle story sometimes obscures. This stretch of ocean has always been unusual, not because of anything supernatural, but because of what it actually is, geologically, oceanographically, atmospherically. A place where the normal rules of ocean navigation apply slightly differently than they do almost anywhere else on Earth. The first European sailors who crossed this region regularly were Spanish treasure ships returning from the Americas in the 16th and 17th centuries. They carried gold and silver from Peru and Mexico back to Spain, sailing north from the Caribbean through what we now call the Bermuda Triangle before turning east across the Atlantic. The route was chosen deliberately. The Gulf Stream, running northeast through this region, added speed to northward journeys, a natural highway of water moving in the right direction, free of charge, available to anyone who knew how to find it. But the Spanish treasure fleets also recorded something that their navigators found consistently troubling: the compass anomaly. Recorded by Columbus in 1492. recorded again by Spanish captains throughout the 1500s. Always in the same region. Always producing the same confusion, a compass that pointed differently than expected, requiring navigational adjustments that experienced sailors found counterintuitive and unsettling. Several Spanish treasure ships were lost in this region between 1500 and 1700. Most of them can be explained. Hurricanes are common in this part of the Atlantic. The ships were heavily laden and not built for rough weather, and the navigation tools of the era were imprecise by modern standards. But some of them cannot be explained so easily. In 1609, a fleet of 9 ships carrying settlers and supplies to the new colony of Virginia sailed into a storm in the Bermuda Triangle region. 8 of the 9 ships survived and made it to Virginia. The 9th, the Sea Venture, carrying the fleet's admiral and 150 passengers, simply disappeared from the sight of the other ships during the storm and was not seen again for 10 months. When the Sea Venture was finally found, it had run aground on the island of Bermuda itself, an island that was considered so dangerous and so surrounded by reefs that sailors called it the Isle of Devils and deliberately avoided it. All 150 passengers and crew had survived. They spent 10 months on the island building 2 new ships from the wreckage of the Sea Venture and eventually sailed on to Virginia. The story of the Sea Venture became one of the most celebrated survival stories of the early colonial era. Some scholars believe it was the inspiration for Shakespeare's play The Tempest, written in 1611, just 2 years after the shipwreck, at a time when the story was the talk of London. A ship lost in a storm in the Bermuda Triangle, stranded on the Isle of Devils, survived by building something new from the wreckage. There is something in that story that feels like more than history. Something that feels like a lesson about what happens when you end up somewhere you were not supposed to go. Sometimes you survive it. Sometimes you even build something better from what was broken. Let your body rest with that thought for a moment. In the 1700s, the region saw another pattern of disappearances that maritime historians had noted, but rarely discuss in the context of the Bermuda Triangle because they predate the legend. Small trading vessels operating between the Caribbean islands and the American colonies would sometimes simply not arrive. In 2017, the United States government did something it had never done before. It released a large collection of previously classified documents. Most of the coverage focused on one particular set of files. But buried in the declassified material were documents that touched on something researchers had been asking about for decades. What did the U.S. military actually know about the Bermuda Triangle? The official position of the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Coast Guard has always been consistent and clear. The Bermuda Triangle is not a recognized navigational hazard. The number of disappearances in the region is not statistically higher than in comparable stretches of ocean. There is no evidence of any unusual phenomenon operating in the area. And that official position is supported by the data. Lloyd's of London, as I mentioned earlier in our journey tonight, does not charge higher premiums for ships crossing the Triangle. The Worldwide Fund for Nature, which tracks maritime disasters globally, does not list the Bermuda Triangle among the world's most dangerous waters. But There are things in the military record that are harder to dismiss so cleanly. After the disappearance of Flight 19 in December 1945, the Navy conducted one of the most extensive investigations in its history. The investigation ran for months. It interviewed every person who had any contact with the flight before takeoff. It analyzed every radio transmission. It reconstructed the likely flight path using every piece of information available. And it reached a conclusion that was later quietly changed. The original investigation board concluded that the disappearance was the fault of Lieutenant Taylor, that his navigation errors had led the flight astray and into the ocean when they ran out of fuel. Taylor's family objected strongly to this conclusion. They argued that Taylor was an experienced pilot who had completed hundreds of successful missions. The Navy reviewed the conclusion and changed it. The revised official conclusion removed the blame from Taylor and changed the cause of the disappearance to causes or reasons unknown. An institution as careful and as proud as the United States Navy does not change an official conclusion lightly. It does not move from a specific named cause to causes or reasons unknown unless it genuinely cannot identify what happened. Causes or reasons unknown. The Navy's most honest statement about the most famous Bermuda Triangle disappearance. There is also the matter of the search protocols. In the years following Flight 19, the Navy quietly adjusted its search and rescue protocols for aircraft disappearances in the western North Atlantic. The adjustments were procedural, changes to how long searches continued, how far from the last known position search grids extended, how wreckage patterns were interpreted in this particular region. These adjustments were not publicized. They were not connected officially to the Bermuda Triangle. They were presented as routine improvements to search and rescue methodology. But researchers who have studied the timeline note that the adjustments were made specifically for the western North Atlantic region, the region that contains the Bermuda Triangle, and not applied uniformly to other ocean areas. Why would you adjust search protocols specifically for one region if you genuinely believed there was nothing unusual about that region? The Navy has never answered that question directly. And perhaps they should not have to. Perhaps the adjustment was simply practical. This is a region where wreckage is carried away quickly by the Gulf Stream, where the ocean floor is among the deepest in the Atlantic, where searches need to cover more ground more quickly than in other regions. Perhaps. Or perhaps the people whose job it was to find missing aircraft and ships in this region had learned something from experience that the official record does not quite capture. Something that made them search differently here than anywhere else. We do not know. You are floating now. Not on the ocean, but in sleep. That soft country between waking and dreaming where the rules of the daytime do not apply. Where a ship can vanish and a compass can point the wrong way and the ocean does not look as it should, and all of it is somehow fine. Because you're not in the ocean. You're here. Warm. Still. Safe. Questions are still out there somewhere. What happened to the Cyclops? What Lieutenant Taylor saw when he looked down and said the ocean did not look as it should. What took the Witchcraft in 19 minutes in calm water a mile from shore? What Columbus saw glowing beneath him in the dark in 1492. The questions are still there. They will be there tomorrow. The ocean does not answer on our schedule. It answers when it answers. Or it does not answer at all. And we learn to live with that the way human beings have always learned to live with the things they cannot explain, by sailing on anyway, by setting out on the journey, even knowing some journeys do not have a known ending, by lying down at night and trusting that morning will come. Even when the compass points wrong. Even when the ocean looks different than it should. Let your eyes be still behind their lids. Let your hands be still. Let your whole body rest. You've traveled a long way tonight. Through dark water and strange history and questions with no clean endings. You can stop traveling now. You're already where you need to be. Warm. Quiet. Still. Good night. Sleep well. And come back tomorrow night. Because the ocean still has secrets. And we have only just begun.